This review has mild spoilers for Hiveswap. If you can't stand spoilers of any type, then buy the game? Hiveswap is a point-and-click adventure game about a human kid who swaps houses, or hives, with an alien kid. You may have heard that this game is based off of Homestuck, but don't worry, you don't need to know what that is to enjoy it. You just need to enjoy pretty pictures. The artwork is great, the human house feels lived in, and a lot of thought went into the bric-a-brac that litters the rooms. Examining things gives a lot of insight into the characters, their backstories, relationships, and the world they live in. Nothing feels like it's put there randomly for a joke, or an out-of-place reference. Everything works towards building your understanding of the world around you, and that's good. And learning about the world and characters by clicking on random background stuff is rewarding, because you can connect certain dots to figure out things before you get a more deliberate explanation later. Like how you can figure out that Joey likes animals and hates guns to rebel against her estranged father that loves hunting and adventure. Or how you can figure out when this all takes place by noticing Joey has a Super Nintendo in her room, and upon finding what looks like a Nintendo 64-shaped controller on the alien world, she appears to not notice the similarity to said controller at all, implying that this game takes place before that console was released, but after the Super Nintendo was released, around 1990-1996. It's little things like that that make you feel really smart for examining stuff. It's satisfyingly cohesive. And for the Homestuck fans, there's lots of little clues as to how these characters fit into the narrative of Homestuck as well. As for the gameplay, it follows the general formula of a point-and-click adventure, but isn't as mind-bogglingly annoying as people generally think the genre to be. Not once did I get stuck for what to do or where to go. Each puzzle was very clear and item management never really became an issue. As long as you pay attention to the text boxes, pretty much everything is spelled out, which is another reward for clicking on everything possible, and I like clicking on everything. Although there was one time I wasn't aware I had to use telekinesis on a thing to pick it up, and I spent 5 minutes clicking on everything else multiple times, but you know, this is how it is. There was this one puzzle which required me to write down a code on a pad of paper, and I fucking love that shit. A+. Though my pleasure there is mostly derived from the idea of writing down a note, and not so much from it being a difficult puzzle to solve. Which is perfect, honestly. Point-and-click games are all about looking around and gathering clues and figuring out the solution like a detective. And anything that adds to that aesthetic, without actually requiring that I have a Holmesian IQ level, makes me rock hard. One thing that's good is that the number of things to click on isn't overwhelming. It only requires a quick sweep of the mouse to find everything clickable-onable. The only real problem gameplay-wise is that there are a few glitchy screen transitions right at the start. Occasionally a cutscene fails to load fast enough and I miss the entire thing. I've heard that's been happening to a lot of people. And sometimes walking to the edge of the screen requires multiple clicks because the screen doesn't scroll down far enough, but overall, the experience was rather smooth. There's no voice acting, as well, which is something I definitely encourage. More than a few games I've heard of have suffered at the distribution of the budget towards hiring voice actors for every little thing. The consequence of this is, of course, that you have to read a lot, which is fine for me, especially considering the music is really great. It's repetitive enough that it doesn't distract you from reading, but interesting enough to find yourself tapping your foot without realizing it. The little cutscenes that play after you solve a puzzle range from being highly animated to a basic slideshow, which shows the indie-ness of the production, but the art is generally great, and the backgrounds especially. The atmosphere of some of these locations is really thick with good. Like this dark room, it could have been pitch black, but you got this sick silhouette thing going on and the scary breathing. Real ominous. Nice. Ooh. The characters we learn about are quite charming and lovable. The dialogue between them is cute and feels pretty authentic for what a bunch of dumb teens would say to each other. The prose used in all the other text boxes has a similar charm and playfulness to it that comes across very casual and fun. Oh, I'm cool. Though compared to Homestuck, it's rather tame. Not just because of the lack of swears, hehe, but because it's less deliberately confusing and difficult to pass, with excessively clever wordplay and meta-humor. It feels appropriately watered down for a more mainstream appeal, which isn't actually mainstream at all. Homestuck is just very unconventional. Attracting a slightly more mainstream audience appears to be what they were going for, what with the troll character having a very reserved typing quirk that's easy to understand, and the decision not to include Siladex fetch mode-eye shenanigans. The gameplay similarly is pretty simple compared to your average point-and-click adventure, though that's probably not as much of a downside seeing as point-and-clicks are generally unpopular due to their convolutedness. But for a big point-and-click fan who loves terrifically brain-teasing puzzles, this game may not satisfy. I don't think this is really a bad thing. It makes a lot of sense to appeal to a wider audience. But for me, the whole thing feels a little basic. It is at this point in the video where the title comes into play. I think Hiveswap is a gateway drug to Homestuck and Homestuck accessories. It has elements in the writing style and the story and characters, even the music, that are more fleshed out and intense within Homestuck, more potent, more juicy. If you have never read Homestuck, I would encourage you to play Hiveswap. If you enjoyed Hiveswap, I would encourage you to read Homestuck. It's a webcomic that's made to look like a text-based adventure where you input commands. That's all you really need to know to get started. I'll put a link in the description. You can go read that. It's Homestuck. Similarly, I feel like it's potentially a gateway drug to point-and-click adventure games themselves. The puzzles here are good, but nothing I did gave me the satisfaction of figuring out something in, say, Broken Sword. If you haven't played a point-and-click adventure before, Hiveswap is a decent place to start. But much like real-life gateway drugs, once you're hooked on the stronger stuff, the gateway drug doesn't do as much for you anymore. And as a big homo, that's what the Homestuck fans are called. Hiveswap is merely pretty fun. But for anyone else, it's going to be excellent. So I definitely recommend it. And Homestuck. Vriska is best girl. Come on, you know it. You know it. Hey, thanks for watching the video. This is the end of the video. Hehehe. I made it. I like Homestuck. Haha. I made a video about Hiveswap. Hehe. Oh, by the way, this is Act 1. Games in parts. I don't know. That's like a whole other video. But I feel like this is worth the price. So there's nothing really to be said there. If the next parts of the game are as good as this one, I feel like it'll be a satisfying experience, and I am looking forward to more. I want to see more. Give me more. Alright, thanks. Subscribe, and I'm a cool guy. If you don't know who I am, I'm cool. That's my name.